And
I don't remember how long ago I saw that tweet, but I knew I had to screenshot it and save it. Hi, I'm LadyJenevia. At the time of me recording this video, episode 9 has aired, and I have already posted my spoiler-free review of episode 10, but the finale has not actually aired. However, I have been wary of this final episode airing ever since I first binged the season 3 screeners months ago when they were first added to the Apple TV press accounts. Obviously, the elephant in the room, Emily and Sue do not have any scenes together or interact directly with one another in the final episode. Since this is supposed to be a spoiler review of episode 10 and thus what is actually in the episode, I don't know how much I should say or what people want me to say about them not having a scene together. But when I said all those months ago that I liked the season finale, but I didn't want to say that it's something that everyone would love because it's difficult to do a great ending for a TV series. Even the ones that are largely regarded positively by the masses, there's no such thing as art with unanimous appeal. To make a long story short, when I said last week that it feels like the finale was made in the way that it was to ensure that they didn't have to rush wrapping things up with a lot of the main characters, this is also what I was referring to, especially when you take into consideration the 30-minute runtime, which can be used up more quickly than you'd expect when you have an ensemble of main characters to tend to. But what am I even doing going out of order like this? Let me first share the 3 do not reveals for this episode, and then we can go through the various characters and the conclusion of their arcs. The first one was Higginson showing up in Amherst to see Emily. I don't know how much of a spoiler that is. Once you've seen episode 9, it was pretty clearly mapped out for that to be what he would be doing next, but it makes sense that you don't want people to know that particular plot point several episodes in advance, like they have everything else from this season. The second do not reveal was Betty getting all of Henry's unsent letters from Higginson. That was a big moment of emotional payoff for me in this finale, probably more than anything else, because Betty deserved this happiness after having to spend all of those episodes worrying about if Henry was okay and being left wondering why he had not written to her. Then the final do not reveal was the reveal of Emily's dog Carlo, the classic white dress, and the mermaids/beach scene. Again, I have to wonder why the different departments were not communicating with each other, considering that Emily wearing that white dress was shown in the show's promo, just like the freaking car, which gave away the time traveling. Will I miss the Dickinson marketing department?
Okay, let's move on.
How about Maggie, huh? Wanting to hook up with Higginson? Go on, Maggie. Maggie definitely didn't have as much to do this season. I felt like both her and Lavinia didn't get to pop quite as much as they did in season 2, but it was just a necessary cut that needed to be made to ensure that enough time was given to all of the material for Henry and the other Black soldiers trying to fight for their rights and their very humanity. Having said that, seeing as how the show began with this core group of characters, it seemed like a fitting ending to have Maggie back in the mix to say some lines, bring her charm. Lavinia got to be chaotic. Her performance art stunt was so funny. We got to see Emily back in her garden, and she said, "Who needs parties when you have a garden?" I love that line, and part of why I loved it is because it reminded me of BBC's Miranda, and this one specific part where Miranda goes, "Who needs relationships when kittens?" And I had never felt so seen by British television, especially since the British industry is notoriously exclusionary to people who look like me.
you know what? I did say that.
We also got to see Death one last time, but he's wearing a new outfit and he's not in the carriage, and it's daytime. Obviously, there are some deeper thematic reasons for him to appear in that form because the show put a lot of focus on war this season. I think it's entirely important for me to remind all of you that even though in this show the war storyline ended to a certain extent, in real life war is constantly being waged. Please try to to keep up with what's going on, you can follow anti-war organizations like Code Pink. They have a page on Twitter that posts about their efforts to defund the military-industrial complex and ways that you can help to get involved. It doesn't help enough to just care about refugees when they're trying to find a new home if you don't look more deeply into why they are being displaced from their homes in the first place. It almost always can be traced back to the military-industrial complex. I know that a fair few of you will not continue to watch my videos after I finish my coverage of Dickinson Season 3, which is why I would not feel right if I didn't encourage you one last time to think more deeply about applying certain lessons from Dickinson Season 3 into your lives. The military-industrial complex is also the #1 source of pollution in the world, and there's a huge crisis happening in Hawaii right now because of the military occupation, which indigenous Hawaiians never agreed to, by the way, but it's by no means the only place suffering from the military's environmental poisoning. So please try to find a way to get involved. Now, back to the show. This episode was one of healing and bringing the family back together again. There was so much conflict and strife within this core group of characters. This doesn't mean that we're supposed to forget that the Dickinson siblings have already reconciled and that there's a clear understanding that Edward Dickinson did a lot of damage to them. However, it's about showing how the Dickinson kids have grown up, and so has Sue. Austin and Sue are able to have a happy family, albeit an unconventional one. But their happiness and their peaceful coexistence is a good thing because it will ultimately mean a healthier environment for their child to grow up in. If this was a different story, one that didn't have historical accuracy to stick to a certain degree, you could make a case for allowing your characters to just cut ties with toxic parents, toxic in-laws, and so on and so forth. But when you also factor in the larger thematic issues this season has addressed with the Civil War storyline, this is a satisfying ending. Being able to work out your differences, being able to mend fences, it's a nice takeaway for the audience to see this family unit make up. It's also nice to feel like there are not a bunch of loose ends left untied. The baby has a name now. I don't like the name choice, but it's not like the writers had a whole lot of creative freedom in that department now, did they? What I like about seeing Sue and Mrs. Dickinson make up in the way that they do is that even though if you wanted to be cynical, you could look at it as Sue conforming to the domestic social norms of women in the 1800s, I would argue that she's really come a long way since season 1. I know I have not rewatched the show anywhere near as much as the biggest fans of it have, but I do remember that Sue had grown up losing family members, experiencing trauma, and that marrying Austin was something she probably felt like she needed to do in order to survive. It makes sense that she didn't want to have children after everything she had been through, but she did get pregnant, and now she's become more confident and self-assured at this place in her life of being married, a mother, and someone who is helping to run a household. Also, the incessant amount of misogynistic mother-in-law writing that Hollywood produces gets tired. Maybe not every woman over the age of 50 is the worst. Honestly, did none of you learn from the First Wives Club? Oh, that film is so good. Fun, unsolicited fact about the First Wives Club. My queen, Patricia Birch, the director of the cinematic masterpiece that is Grease 2, was the choreographer for the First Wives Club. She really can do it all. Anyway, circling back around to Higginson arriving at the Dickinson household, did anyone else find it hilarious when he asked the Dickinson family about Emily? Tell me, when did you first realize she was a genius? How often do you think Emily has gotten into scuffles with her family members over her being the way that she is? But now, she's finally getting a higher tier of validation from a man she's never met in person. Sometimes it takes an outsider to see the truth. Should I not quote House of Gucci in my Dickinson review? Too bad, I just did it anyway.
You are a painful appendage that needs to be removed.
Okay, that was the last one. Another point I want to remind people of in regards to Dickinson family members is about Austin. Remember how earlier this season Austin took part in draft dodging and eventually he told the truth about it? Sue told him that he didn't need to go to war to be a real man. And I was saying how the subtext of that seemed to be that he should be using that opportunity of having enough privilege to dodge the draft in the first place to not only be a physically and emotionally present father, but to also find ways to make a difference on a larger scale. Well, this is where it finally comes to fruition. He brings up Angeline Palmer, explaining that the Shaw family hatched a scheme to sell Angeline into slavery. She was smuggled out of the house by her brothers, and now those men are on trial. Angeline Palmer was a real person. I'm going to link a piece about her so you can learn more about her story in the description box. But what I really want all of you to remember is that this directly relates to the prison industrial complex that is still around today, which is the intersection of capitalism and fascism, the school to prison pipeline, and the rampant police brutality that predominantly affects Black and brown children and adults. I know I've called out the military industrial complex numerous times during this season's reviews, but the prison industrial complex is also extremely important to keep in mind and find ways to get involved so it can be dismantled, overthrown, and so on and so forth. I appreciate that Austin's happy ending is not just about him getting to be a father, but the maturation of him as a character means that even though we've spent all this time with him being angry at his father, he's willing to put aside those differences for the greater good of working to fight back against the systemic racism of the American judicial system. Before Betty got her letters from Higginson, she came over to apologize to Emily, which I don't think she needed to do, but it was a good way to get her and Emily in a room together so they could design Emily's new dress together. So many great lines that nicely satirize the horrific beauty standards that women of the 1800s had to deal with, but also still have to deal with today by the beauty industry, which is a capitalist concoction by men to make money off of women. And I'm not hating on makeup, I obviously enjoy it, but I'm just saying I only wear a full beat for filming videos because your skin does not need a full face of foundation to go to the grocery store. You know what you need? Sunscreen. Wear your SPF. Capitalist healthcare systems will try to make you homeless if you get skin cancer. Corsets suck to wear, maybe for a special occasion or a photo shoot, but Emily was totally right to get rid of hers. Buttons up the front so you can dress yourself. A woman dressing herself, apparently a revolutionary concept in the 1800s. The one thing I didn't understand though about this scene, so feel free to chime in if you know something about the history of fashion that I don't. When Emily said that a white dress would be better because it would be easier to wash, what planet is she from? I cannot remember the last time I voluntarily got a white item of clothing. White clothes are like a giant green light for stains, makeup, food, beverages, general environmental interactions. And there's just something about all white clothing that does not sit right with my spirit nowadays. But obviously all of these things are leading up to the final sequence so that they can show Emily with different iconography, the white dress, the dog, the mermaids, and she's meant to be going into the future, not so much in a time traveling sense, since she already did that, but in an artistic sense. Obviously, Emily will continue to live her life, but as an artist, her art will go to the future, and there's something really poetic about how the show had previously said this season that for women, the future will never come, but Emily's art will continue to live on. I feel pretty confident that the intention behind the show's ending, because you have other lines in the episode that directly relate to that, such as great writing finds a way to reach its audience, or people might have to wait centuries to understand her, which is true. That's probably part of why they showed the perspective of Emily that they did back in the time traveling episode. It took time for Emily's poems to not only reach the audience that they now have, but for Emily's queerness to be understood the way that it is now. I think I can leave things there, but of course, as I previously mentioned, I will also be posting a video talking a bit more about Emily and Sue's arc from this season and some of the other factors I wanted to mention about how I understood and experienced that part of the story. So if you're watching this video right when it's just gone live, then stay tuned because I should be posting that video sometime soon. So I'll see you there. Bye.